Hey guys, tonight we step barefoot onto the warm, sun-baked earth of 14th century Mali, where the cities breathe, the rivers hum, and the walls of buildings glow like they remember the sun. You find yourself in Genius, the Jannah, legendary city where architecture is made not of cold stone or rigid brick, but of living, pulsing mud. Not exactly your average real estate brochure, huh? Your sandals squish slightly as you trudge through the narrow alleyways, the air heavy, with the scent of smoked fish and shea butter. A flock of children chases a goat wearing what might be someone's laundry, and an old man sitting beneath a gnarled baobab offers you a mango with no words, just a nod. You're not sure if this is a greeting, a test, or lunch, but you accept it anyway. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'd love to know, where are you listening from, and what time is it where you are? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background. And let's ease into the night's journey together. You've arrived in Jen, just after sunrise. The Niger River glimmers to your left, doing that lazy coiled snake thing rivers do when they've carved the land for centuries. At this hour, the walls of the great mosque shimmer faintly, made entirely of adobe, but shaped into a skyline that somehow looks like it's growing rather than standing. And here's the kicker. It's rebuilt every year by the community in a festival that turns maintenance into music. You're almost disappointed you missed it almost. People pass by in flowing balbus dyed with indigo, so deep it looks like melted night. Some balance water jugs on their heads like it's nothing. You try it with a small gourd. It lasts 6 seconds. Respect. There's an ambient hum that fills the space between footsteps. Chants from an open-air madrasa, pots clinking at a breakfast stall, a griot's voice rising with the sun as he sings of battles fought and goats stolen. You pass a young man sketching into wet mud with a stick. He says it's a verse from the Quran, but admits it might also be a grocery list. Historians still argue whether this kind of mud inscription was an early form of personal note-keeping or purely spiritual practice. The marketplace is just waking up. You smell dates, onions, kola nuts, and some kind of fermented fish paste that hits you like a freight train made of anchovies. But there's also the sweet grounding smell of fresh clay. It's everywhere, in bricks drying in the sun, in the earthen homes, and the incense burners that puff like sleepy volcanoes. It's as if the city isn't just built from mud, it is mud. Alive, adaptable, forgiving in the dry season, and mysteriously resistant to rain. You touch a wall. It's warm and slightly spongy, like earth that's been taught how to breathe. You lean into a quiet corner cafe where tea is being poured in long, ribboning streams into tiny glasses. A man with half a beard and double the charisma tells you that Jen isn't ancient, it's eternal. He says the city was born when fish still ruled the desert. You raise an eyebrow. He raises two. You don't push the point. And while you sip your tea, which tastes like mint, sugar, and some powerful intentions, you learn something else. This isn't just a trading town. It's a portal. People here speak Bambara, Sinink, Fulani, and Tuareg. A single deal in this market might involve Moroccan salt, Nigerian kola nuts, Ghanaian gold, and a very tired donkey. You're watching the world get smaller, one conversation at a time. One woman walks by selling tiny clay birds' charms. She says, for safe travels. Another is offering charms against safe travels, depending on how your day is going. Both are popular. You buy one of each dot, and here comes the fringe detail. Someone tells you that once a year, the town's fortune teller climbs the mosque to scatter baobab leaves into the wind. Supposedly, whichever way they fly determines the next trading season. Historians still argue whether this was spiritual meteorology or just very committed performance art. But look closer, and you see the deeper infrastructure of the city. Jen isn't chaos, it's choreography. Water channels dug in concentric lines guide rain to underground cisterns. Homes are angled to catch breezes in the long, dry season. And families have built homes atop homes, turning roof terraces into social clubs, drying racks, and sometimes awkwardly guest rooms. You'll sleep on one later, and yes, someone's chicken will join you. By now, your feet are caked in dust. A child with serious eyebrows offers you a damp cloth like it's a peace treaty. You take it. It smells of jasmine and goat, which seems to be the default fragrance here. And just before dusk, you stand again in front of the mosque. This close, the buttresses rise like giant fingers cradling the sky. It's not just a place of worship, it's a manifesto of community, of mud, as memory, of a city that doesn't just withstand time, it reinvents it, one layer of clay at a time. You wake to the sound of something halfway between a drumbeat and a goat sneeze. It's a potter thumping clay into shape, while her herd of particularly dramatic livestock makes their morning opinions known. You're still curled on a rooftop. In Jen, wrapped in a blanket that smells faintly of firewood and shea butter, the sun stretching its first gold fingers across the mud brick skyline. Welcome to your second day in a city where everything religion, economy, even beauty is built from dirt and sweat. You descend a ladder that looks more decorative than structurally sound. You survive, but barely, and your toes sink into a street still soft from last night's rain. Yes, the mud here can seem like a minor nuisance. It clings to you like a gossip. But here's the twist. It's also sacred. The walls of the great mosque loom nearby, not cold like European stone. Cathedrals, the warm and porous, a soft kind of majesty. You run your hand along the surface, and it leaves a streak-like wet chalk, but it's not damage. The wall expects this. It needs to be touched, repacked, reborn. It's alive, in a way. Think of it less like a building, and more like a very patient dog that needs grooming once a year. Around you, the market's heartbeat quickens. Bright canopies stretch above wooden stalls. Merchants are shouting about melon seeds, indigo dyes, copper bangles, and something mysterious called desert cheese, which, honestly, you're not brave enough to sample just yet. Women with intricately woven hair carry baskets with the grace of water birds. A toddler is loudly insisting he did in fact pay for that mango. The seller disagrees. A chicken weighs in. The jury's still out. But let's talk architecture. You notice that no two homes are exactly the same. Yet they all seem related like cousins at a family reunion. They're made from banco, a mixture of mud and rice husks, molded by hand and left to bake in the sun. Roofs are flat, perfect for drying onions, gossiping with neighbors, or napping in a warm breeze. Wooden beams jut out from walls at regular intervals, not just decorative. They're scaffolding for the yearly replastering. This ritual, the Crepusage de la Grande Mosquée, is both civic duty and town-wide party. Everyone participates. Kids mix clay. Elders chant blessings. Teenagers pretend to help while flirting behind water jars. Historians still argue whether this communal rebuilding emerged from practical need or religious symbolism or both. What's clear is that it's made Gen timeless. It's not just preserving history. It's making it squishy and social. You duck into a courtyard where a woman shapes clay into bowls with fingers, so fast you wonder if she's part hummingbird. She smiles and offers you a seat beside her. The ground is cool. A low hum fills the air. Maybe it's bees, or just the way sound settles here. She tells you that in Gen, every wall has a memory, and every market has a rhythm. Then she points to her house. It has patterns pressed into the facade swirls, triangles, an odd spiral that looks like an ancient Wi-Fi symbol. These decorations aren't just flair. They tell stories. Family lineage, marriage status, even superstitions. You ask about the spiral. She grins. It keeps away nosy spirits. You glance over your shoulder. Nothing there ... probably. You hear chanting soft, melodic, drifting from a nearby school. It's a Quranic class, held in the open air, under a neem tree. Boys recite verses, rocking gently as they memorize. Their wooden boards or loo are smoothed with oil and often decorated with patterns. Some kids scribble notes in the margins. One has drawn what you think is a camel wearing sunglasses. The mud brick architecture extends into education. The madrasa is an adobe labyrinth cooled by thick walls and narrow windows. You pass an old scholar who nods and mutters. Knowledge is like fire. If you don't guard it, it burns your house down. You're not sure if that's a proverb or a very specific warning, but you nod gravely. Quirky tidbit time. In some homes, elders store amulets inside the wall, small leather packets holding prayers or medicinal herbs. One story goes that a family once sealed a live lizard into their foundation as a luck charm. Historians still argue whether this was tradition or someone just got very distracted during construction. You wander back toward the mosque and realize something subtle but striking. The city smells different depending on where you are. Near the Potter's Quarter, there's that earthy, clay-rich aroma. Near the food stalls, it's millet porridge and groundnut stew. By the river, it's wet silt and smoked catfish. And always underneath it all, that persistent, oddly comforting scent of sun-baked mud dot. As evening sets in, the light softens and the city glows in golden tones. You pass a young couple whispering on a rooftop, their silhouettes framed by twilight. A boy runs by chasing a hoop, laughing like it's the only sound that matters. Somewhere nearby, a grandmother sings a lullaby that might also be a warning about jackals. Hard to say. And you think these mud walls so humble, so handmade, have outlived kingdoms. They've endured rain, heat, politics, pigeons. They don't rise toward heaven like Gothic spires. They hold steady to the earth, and in doing so, they become the city. Not protecting life from the outside, but housing it from the inside out. So, yeah, next time someone tells you mud is dirty, maybe remind them that an empire once made it shimmer. You're up before sunrise again, but this time, the air feels different. Crisper, sharper. Somewhere out there, beyond the mud walls and mango trees, bells are chiming, not church bells. Not exactly, more like bronze clappers dangling from the necks of camels. Faint and rhythmic, they sound like the heartbeat of the Sahara itself. This, you realize, is the sound of trade. And you're about to follow it all the way to Timbuktu. No, not the mythical Timbuktu of cartoons and throwaway jokes. The real one. A crossroads of knowledge and salt, of gold dust and desert winds, of mystics and mathematicians. You're heading northwest now, across a shimmering sea of sand and dry scrub. You're not alone. Ahead of you stretches a caravan, impossibly long. Dozens of camels plod forward in a slow-motion parade, each draped in patterned cloth and stacked high with bundles. The traders walk beside them, speaking in Sinink, Tamashek, Arabic sometimes all at once. You fall into step with a young man who introduces himself as Halil. He offers you a date from a small pouch and warns you not to chew too hard. His cousin once cracked a tooth and had to barter for dental advice with 3 chickens and a goat named Sadness. You take a more cautious bite. It's 3 days' journey to Timbuktu, but Halil assures you the worst danger isn't bandits or dehydration, it's boredom. The Sahara, he says, is always quieter than you expect. Until it's not. He's right. You listen. The sand hisses beneath hooves. Wind hums like it's thinking. Sometimes you hear ... nothing. That kind of silence you only find when nature is holding its breath. Along the route, you pass other caravans heading the opposite way, loaded with ivory, glass beads, and scrolls. One camel wears what appears to be eyeliner. Halil says it's coal, and it's for eye protection. You suspect the camel just likes the drama. By the time Timbuktu's outer walls come into view, you're coated in dust and mildly sun-pickled. But the city itself, it appears like a mirage that refused to leave. Low, flat buildings stretch toward the sky in a lazy sprawl, their adobe walls glowing amber in the late afternoon light. Narrow alleys snake between them, some barely wide, enough for 2 people to pass. And always, overhead, prayer flags flutter and pigeons gossip. The city smells of parchment, turmeric, sweat, and sandalwood. As you cross a wooden footbridge into the main quarter, children rush past carrying bundles of papyrus. Not for tourists. There are no tourists. These are students, racing to their lessons like scrolls are about to sprout legs and run away. You pass a man selling slabs of salt, as big as doorsteps. He offers to trade you one for your boots. You hesitate. Halil whispers, "Bad deal. That salt's probably been sweated on by 5 camels already." You step into a souk where copperware gleams and the air shivers with the scent of dried limes. You see scrolls laid out like treasure maps, some bearing neat Arabic script, others riddled with star charts and medicinal recipes. One mentions a powder made from crushed ostrich eggs that supposedly cures insomnia. You make a mental note. And here's your historical gem. This city is not just about gold. It's about knowledge. Timbuktu once housed over 700,000 manuscripts on astronomy, law, poetry, agriculture, and even humor. Yes, you find a scrap of verse that reads, "Better to marry a patient wife than a fast-talking goat." You wonder how many goats were consulted. Inside, a mud brick university, the famed Sankar Mosque, students sit cross-legged as their teacher chants from memory. There are no desks, just mats and centuries of respect. Lessons aren't timed. They unfold like the desert slow, sweeping and deep. One boy leans in and asks a question about Greek mathematics. The teacher smiles and launches into a 5-minute detour on the usefulness of shadows. No one complains. You learn that many scholars in Timbuktu came from far away. Andalusia, Egypt, even Persia. They brought not just scrolls, but stories. And they left behind a golden trail of ideas. Historians still argue whether Timbuktu's libraries were state-sponsored or grassroots efforts by wealthy families. Either way, knowledge here wasn't locked in towers. It wandered the streets, dusty and barefoot. Here's a fun fringe fact. One document in the Ahmed Baba Institute describes a legal case involving a man who tried to sell his neighbor's goat by disguising it with dyed fur. The case was thrown out when the goat started answering to its real name. This, apparently, counted as evidence. You walk past an open courtyard where elderly men sip tea in silence, their turbans folded like origami. One looks up and says, 2. Live in Timbuktu is to dream while awake. You don't argue. You feel it 2. Evening falls. The call to prayer ripples through the city like a lullaby. You sit beside the river, your legs dangling just above the water. Fireflies blink like lost ideas returning home. Somewhere in the distance, a storyteller begins reciting the tale of a merchant who fell in love with a lioness disguised as a woman. The ending's debatable. You look back at the city, its flat roofs, its palm trees, its warm books and watchful cats. Timbuktu, made from mud, guarded by memory, shaped by stars. A place that once sent knowledge across the world on the backs of camels and dreams. And just as the sky turns the color of warm ash, Halil hands you a rolled parchment. For luck, he says, you open it later. It's blank. Or maybe not. Maybe the words only appear when you're ready. You're back on the road. Though road is generous, it's more a suggestion of direction than any real infrastructure. But today, your sandals slap against something unexpected. Paving stones. Actual cobblestones, dark and worn. Threading. Like a ribbon across open savanna. You squint ahead. In the distance, rising like a low tide of architecture, is Niani, the royal capital of the Mali Empire. And your next stop. You'd think a royal city might shout about itself a bit more. But Niani doesn't boast. It simmers. It hides behind its own legend, nestled between hills and shaded by groves of baobab and tamarind trees. There's no great wall here, no glittering gates. Just the quiet hum of a place that knows exactly who it is. The beating heart of an empire that once commanded more land than France and more gold than sense. You're ushered toward the palace complex by a man named Sori, who carries himself like a royal librarian, but wears sandals held together with string. He introduces himself as a scribe of loose importance, which you decide is the exact job title you've been searching for your whole life. The palace isn't towering or gilded. It's sprawling, a series of connected courtyards and long, mud brick halls. Decorative wooden lattice filters sunlight into patterns on the ground. You pass musicians tuning chorus strings and women balancing brass. Trays of millet cakes on their heads with the poise of trapeze artists. A parrot shrieks something suspiciously like, "Pay your taxes." But it might just be the heat. Inside one of the shaded courtyards sits the emperor's throne. Not a chair, but a platform draped in woven cloth and shaded by a parasol the size of a fishing boat. You're told this is the symbol of power in Mali. Not height, but shade. The bigger your parasol, the more people you can protect. It's oddly poetic dot as you walk the perimeter of the court. Sori gestures to the scribes copying documents at low tables. They say the empire writes itself, he murmurs. But someone's always holding the reed. You nod like you understand. You mostly just like the vibe. Your historical anchor for today. Niani served as a center of administration, diplomacy, and royal ceremony during the 14th century, particularly under the reign of Mansa Musa. Yes, that Mansa Musa, the man whose Hajj was so extravagant it destabilized the gold markets of 2 continents. But here in Niani, he's remembered less for his bling and more for his books. He invested heavily in scholarship, sending envoys to bring back texts, scholars, and architects. One traveler wrote that his palace held more manuscripts than jewels. You peek inside a royal storeroom and find bundles of scrolls bound in leather, stacked beside jars of powdered dyes and baskets of kola nuts. Sori explains that some records are kept in verse. Poems help the mind remember, and sometimes forget. You're not sure if he means something tragic or romantic. He won't clarify. Librarians.now for your quirky tidbit. One corridor here is rumored to be haunted, not by ghosts, but by mistakes. Palace scribes whisper that if you miswrite a royal decree, the ink itself will crawl back into the well by dawn. No one has seen it happen, of course, but everyone agrees it has. Historians still argue whether this is metaphor, superstition, or just an elaborate way to keep junior scribes from slacking off. Out in the wider city, Niani thrums with industry. Goldsmiths hammer tiny leaves of metal into ornaments finer than fish scales. Leatherworkers dye pouches and vats the color of ox blood. A woman weaves a blanket while casually nursing a baby and reciting genealogy from memory. You get the distinct impression you are, at best, the 4th most productive person within 5 feet. Children run between buildings, playing a game that involves shouting royal titles while throwing baobab seeds. You hear, Chief of Salt, Princess of Rain, Scribe of Flatulence. That last one gets a huge laugh. Childhood humor truly transcends centuries. As you sit beneath a neem tree, eating rice with peanut sauce off a communal platter. Sori tells you of a now lost building called the House of Questions. Built near the court, it was a place where anyone, peasant or merchant, could publicly pose queries to royal advisors. Some were answered. Some weren't. Some, like, why do chickens fear mirrors? Sparked full-on debates. Scholars are still trying to figure out if this was satire or sincere civic inquiry. Dusk falls in rose-colored gradients, and the city lights up not with torches, but with lanterns shaped like stars, casting flickering constellations onto courtyard walls. You pass a griot sitting cross-legged, weaving tales of past kings into rhythmic verse. His voice is low and textured, like gravel soaked in honey. He sings of a queen who once out-traded an entire caravan by whispering prices the wind couldn't carry. You suspect it's a metaphor, but also, you'd buy her mangoes. You spend the night in a guest house beside the palace gardens. The walls are etched with floral patterns. The window is shaped like a cowrie shell. Somewhere nearby, frogs chirp in lazy harmony, like nature's own lullaby band. And as you drift to sleep, belly full, head buzzing with poetry and politics, you realize that Niani doesn't scream its greatness. It doesn't need to. Like the thick mud walls that hold its secrets, this city knows that quiet power lasts longer, especially when written down in ink that maybe, possibly, walks away when misused. The morning sun greets you with a dusty gold glow, seeping through the screen of your window like warm honey through a sieve. Birds argue in the baobab branches outside. and someone nearby is pounding millet with a rhythmic thud, dash thud, dash thud, like a heartbeat from another century. You stretch, stand, and take one last look at Niati before setting off, not away, but deeper. Today, you're headed into the muscle of the empire. It's mud dot, yes, literal mud. Because that's how cities here are built out of earth, water, and astonishing creativity. And you're about to witness how this humble material gave rise to dazzling urban centers that shimmered like gold in the sun, even when they crumbled in the rain. You set off alongside a caravan of builders, masons, and apprentices. They're heading to a nearby town to repair the local mosque before the rainy season. One of them, a wiry man with dust perpetually coating his eyelashes, introduces himself as Baro. Mud is patient, he says. It listens when you build with it. You wonder how long it took him to come up with that. Probably while mixing clay dot as you walk. Baro explains the process. The mud they use isn't just any dirt. It's special, rich with clay and silt from the Niger River, often mixed with straw, cow dung, and crushed baobab pods. The result is something between concrete and cake batter, and it's delicious to termites, which is why every year the buildings must be replastered by hand. Yes, even the great mosques stop by midday. You arrive at a town where buildings rise like sandcastles frozen mid-melt. Their walls are thick and cool to the touch, the color of cinnamon. Wooden beams stick out horizontally, not for decoration, but as scaffolding for the annual replastering. Kids climb them like jungle gyms. Adults just pretend they don't. You take a tour of the local mosque, guided by a man named Adama, who claims the structure once melted slightly during a rainstorm and had to be resculpted overnight with torches and sheer optimism. Historians still debate whether this really happened or if it's just a particularly resilient bit of folklore. Either way, the result is stunning. The mosque doesn't look like it was constructed. It looks like it grew dot inside. The air's cool and smells faintly of palm oil and sun-baked paper. Pillars divide the space like an orchard of mud trunks, and tiny slits in the walls let in beams of light sharp enough to slice mangoes. You watch as men sweep the floors with branches tied into fans. No one rushes. Time moves differently in mud. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Sudano-Sahelian style of architecture, found throughout Mali and neighboring regions, is one of the most distinctive on the planet. It blends local materials with Islamic design arched doorways. Mihrabs facing Mecca but built not in marble or stone, but earth. And unlike many ancient structures, these aren't abandoned ruins. They're living buildings, used daily, cherished COMUNALLY. Outside, you join a team mixing mud. It's messier than expected and smells faintly of compost and ambition. A teenage girl with a scarf tied like a crown laughs as you try and fail to stomp the mud without losing your balance. Even emperors had to learn, she says. You choose to believe that's historically accurate. Your quirky tidbit for the day? In some towns, building height was traditionally linked to social status, not by decree, but by architectural gossip. If someone suddenly added an extra story to their home, neighbors might assume they'd received a visit from the emperor, or won a spectacular lawsuit. In one recorded case, a man built a 2-story mud house just to impress a marriage prospect. She married someone else. The house remains slightly bitter. Later, you're invited to a communal meal beneath a canopy of palm fronds. Roasted yam, jollof rice, and a spicy sauce that Baro warns should not be trusted. As you eat, stories are traded like currency. One elder claims he once helped rebuild the Jen Mosque with only 3 tools and a stubborn goat. Another swears that during one rainy season, an entire building slid 2 feet south and no one noticed for 3 weeks. Is it true? Maybe not. But the laughter it sparks is very real. As dusk falls, you join a nighttime walk through the city. Shadows elongate against the adobe walls, and fireflies blink in the cracks between buildings. You can feel the buildings breathing. Not literally, of course, but each one seems to hold memory in its curves, like clay molded by centuries of hands. And that's what hits you most. These mud cities are not relics. They are rituals. Every wall, every patch, every splash of fresh plaster is an act of preservation and community. They don't just survive the weather, they expect it. And they adapt on as you return to your sleeping mat, tired and smeared with drying mud. Baro hands you a small lump of sun-dried clay. Take it, he says. When you get home, drop it in water. If it dissolves, it remembers where it came from. You smile, unsure if that's science or poetry. Maybe both. Like everything in Mali. You wake up to the sound of roosters arguing across rooftops somewhere between an alarm clock and a neighborhood drama. Your legs ache in a way that suggests you mixed mud a little too enthusiastically yesterday. Still, there's no time to linger. Today, you're heading into the rhythm and soul of the Mali Empire. Its markets. Markets in 14th century Mali are not quiet affairs. They are swirling, jangling symphonies of trade, chatter, spice smoke, and the occasional chicken escaping justice. You're walking into one of the largest in the region, located in the city of Dia, a hub older than Timbuktu and just as storied. The smell hits first roasted she-nuts, fermented fish, and the sharp tang of indigo dye. You think you catch a whiff of cinnamon, but it might just be someone's perfume. The market is organized chaos. Stalls made of thatch and cloth lean into one another like gossiping aunties. You pass a cloth merchant arguing passionately with a potter over the price of a bowl. A boy balances 4 wooden trays of dates on his head while chewing a mango. Somewhere in the distance, someone is playing a 2-string ngoni, the notes skipping like river stones. Your guide today is a woman named Kadi, who's been running a salt and dye stall for 20 years and tells you this fact within 40 seconds. I've sold to princes and pickpockets, she says, though some days they're the same. You like her immediately. She takes you on a whirlwind tour, pointing out the key zones: gold, salt, grain, cloth, livestock, and of course, books. Yes, books. Mali's markets were as intellectual as they were material. Kadi rolls her eyes at the thought. The bookmen haggle worse than the fishmongers. Here's your historical fact. Mali's markets were transcontinental trade nodes, connecting West Africa to North Africa, the Middle East, and even parts of Europe. Through the trans-Saharan trade routes, Mali exported gold, ivory, and kola, nuts, and imported salt, horses, textiles, and perhaps most importantly, ideas. Merchants weren't just traders. They were couriers of philosophy, theology, astronomy, and occasionally, spicy gossip from Cairo. You pass a stall selling little packets of what looks like red powder. Kadi explains it's a blend of dried hibiscus, cayenne, and something she. refuses to name. It's for mending broken hearts or starting wars, she says. Depends how you cook it. You buy two. Nearby, a camel sits in the shade of a date palm, chewing something contemplatively. Its owner swears the beast can recognize counterfeit gold. Historians still argue whether Malian traders truly had chemical tests for gold purity, or whether they just trusted the camel's vibes. Either way, the animal seems deeply unimpressed by you. You sit with Caddy in her stall for a while, watching her haggle with terrifying elegance. A customer asks for 3 measures of indigo, and she counters with 2, plus a proverb. The customer laughs, pays full price, and leaves with a pouch of salt for luck. You try to understand what just happened. You fail. Here's a delightful little tidbit. Some Malian traders used silent bargaining techniques. In busy or sensitive stalls, especially where high-value items like gold dust were involved, the buyer would leave an offer, say, a bundle of cloth or a bag of millet, and walk away. The seller would either take it and leave the goods or reject the offer by removing their wares. No words exchanged, just vibes and trust. It's like shopping in incognito mode. Later, you visit the grain district, where women sort millet, sorghum, and rice into colorful pyramids. A little girl offers you a roasted locust on a stick. Very crunchy, she promises. You believe her and politely pretend you just had breakfast. Someone tries to sell you a blessed shoe that allegedly belonged to Mansa Musa. You point out it's a sandal made from a car tire. He shrugs. He had many shoes. At the edge of the market, you find a quiet stall with folded manuscripts. The merchant, an old man with eyes like cracked leather, lets you hold one. It's a treatise on astronomy, charts of stars, written in flowing Arabic script, with tiny annotations in local dialects. You run your fingers across the parchment and feel the weight of time. This wasn't just a market. It was a university with donkeys. By late afternoon, the market begins to wind down. Smoke curls from food stalls. Music rises in gentle waves. Children chase each other between the stalls, using fish heads as puppets. You find Kadi again and thank her for the tour. She hands you a tiny vial of something pink and glittering. Wear this on your wrist next time you bargain. It makes people generous. You raise an eyebrow. Magic? She winks. Cleverness mixed with perfume. You make your way out of the market with your bag heavier than it was, though you're not quite sure with what. Salt? Spices? A camel's skepticism? Mostly, you carry the feeling of life of people living not beside trade, but through it. Commerce here is not cold or sterile. It's textured, loud, personal, and full of mischief. As the sun lowers and the earth turns to bronze beneath your feet, you realize that Mali's wealth was never just gold. It was exchange of goods, of stories, of stares across crowded stalls. A civilization that thrived because it talked to itself one joke, one proverb, one quiet bargain at a time. Night in the Sahel can be as dramatic as any opera. You fall asleep to a chorus of crickets, wake to the sharp trill of early birds, and by the time you rub your eyes, the air is already warming like a blanket just pulled from the fire. Today, you're making your way north, toward the shimmering horizon where dunes kiss the sky, toward Timbuktu. Yes, that Timbuktu. The name that's become shorthand for the end of the earth, when in reality, it was the center of an intellectual world, a dusty, sun-beaten library of a city. But to get there, You first have to cross a chunk of the Sahara on camelback. You're not alone. You've joined a caravan of traders and scholars, their camels loaded with salt slabs, book chests, bundles of cloth, and some suspiciously grumpy chickens. The guide, a desert-hardened man named Timbuktu, hands you a long scarf called a tagelmust to wrap around your head for sun, sand, and unexpected visitors, he says. You decide not to ask. The journey is slow. Very slow. Camels move like they're thinking through each footstep. You rock back and forth like laundry in a wash basin. The horizon never seems to change, and yet somehow the light always does, blues shifting to golds, golds to oranges, and back again. You sip water constantly and still feel like a raisin. But then, one afternoon, the mirage becomes real. Spires appear on the horizon, and before you know it, you're standing in Timbuktu. And it's quiet. Not grand in a marble and monuments way, but dense with mystery. You half expect the scholar to emerge from every shadow, clutching a scroll and muttering about eclipses. Here's your mainstream fact. By the 14th century, Timbuktu was one of the world's foremost centers of learning, home to the legendary Sankara University and hundreds of private libraries. Students came from as far as Cairo, Fez, and even southern Europe. The curriculum ranged from Quranic studies to astronomy, medicine, law, and yes, poetry, including some impressively moody breakup verses. Timbuktu leads you to a guest house where a scholar named Awa greets you. She's wiry, sharp-eyed, and so buried in books you're not entirely convinced. She stopped reading since 1308. You're here for gold? She asks with a smile. Then learn something. It's heavier. She shows you into a study room, where manuscripts rest like sleeping cats, some wrapped in leather, others in cloth, most just lying open, as if waiting for someone to argue with them. You notice many of them aren't even in Arabic. They're written in Ajami local African languages, transcribed in Arabic script. Knowledge didn't just arrive, Awa says. It adapted. Here's your fringe fact. Some of these manuscripts include recipes for eye salves, records of rainfall patterns, and astrological charts so detailed they resemble board games. One particularly odd volume appears to be a spell for repelling sand fleas using vinegar, a goat's whisker, and a firm telling off. You flip through a book about architecture and stumble on a drawing of a massive stone structure, except it's underwater. Awa chuckles. Historians still argue whether Malians once imagined cities beneath the Niger, or if that's just wishful flooding. Later, she invites you to an evening debate at the university courtyard. Students sit on low mats, arguing softly about whether the moon governs human behavior. One quotes Aristotle. Another counters with Ibn Sina. A third just holds up a diagram of a nose and makes a strong case for better hygiene. You learn that scholars here were required to master not only law and theology, but also memorization techniques, calligraphy, and polite disagreement. A sharp tongue dulled with kindness, Awa says. That's our tradition. You also discover the university had dormitories, gardens, and something disturbingly close to pop quizzes. One student confesses he once faked an eclipse prediction, just to get out of public recitation. He was caught. The punishment? Copying 30 verses of a poem about humility. In calligraphy. As night falls, Awa takes you to the rooftop, where you sit on woven mats and look out over the city. The roofs are flat, the walls soft and earthen, glowing faintly in the moonlight. The air smells of dried herbs, old parchment, and charcoal smoke. And then she shows you a box. Inside are gold-leafed manuscripts, books worth more than an entire camel caravan. Some are poetry anthologies. Others are letters between scholars. One is a map hand-drawn, complete with tiny boats and mythical beasts lounging in the corners. This, she says, is what we fought to protect, not walls. Words. You fall silent, humbled. Timbuktu wasn't just a city. It was an idea that the mind could stretch as far as the desert horizon, and then some. That gold could glitter from a page dot as you head to bed. The thought lingers like incense, that a person could arrive here empty-handed and leave heavy with thought. And that even now, long after its golden age, Timbuktu remains more legend than location. By the time morning sneaks over the walls of Timbuktu, you're already up, rubbing the sand from your eyes and preparing for what the day will bring. Because today, you're going to witness the true lifeblood of this glittering empire not. Its palaces or libraries, but its gold mines. Yes, actual gold. The shimmering stuff that made Mali legendary from Cairo to Venice. And you're heading south toward the heart of it, where rivers churn red in the rainy season, and men dig the earth with patience and muscle. You travel with a small group merchants, guards, and a man who claims to have once sneezed gold dust. He does it again mid-journey to prove the point. It's just sand. Everyone nods politely. The journey is long, weaving past villages of round mud brick homes, where goats loiter like furry skeptics. You cross shallow rivers and skirt the edges of baobab groves, their trunks swollen like they're hoarding secrets. By mid-afternoon, the land changes, paler soil, sharper heat, and men walking with picks slung over their shoulders. Welcome to the Bambuk goldfields. Here's your historical fact. By the 14th century, Mali controlled multiple major gold-producing regions, including Bambuk, Bure, and Galam. The empire's grip on these deposits turned it into one of the richest realms on earth. Mansa Musa's famed pilgrimage, funded in part by these mines. He gave away so much gold in Cairo that the price of it reportedly crashed for years. The mine itself isn't what you expect. No vast craters or shiny nuggets glinting under the sun. Just narrow shafts dug deep into the dry earth, lined with wood and determination. Miners' men, some barely more than boys climb in barefoot with baskets. They vanish into the ground like whispers. Your guide, an old prospector named Bakari, gives you a wink. It's not the gold that's hard, it's finding it again. He hands you a small wooden pan and gestures toward a nearby stream where younger workers sift through the sediment, swirling and tilting like they're performing a slow dance. You try it and nearly tip the whole thing into the water. Gold hunting, not for the impatient. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some miners chewed special bark said to sing when gold was near. Others wore amulets containing prayers, feathers, or even bits of snake skin, anything to please the spirits of the earth. One miner tells you his uncle only finds gold when he sings about soup. You don't ask. You sit with Bakari under a shade cloth for a while as he explains the process. Digging, sifting, washing, and finally, weighing, sometimes with scales, sometimes by eye. You learn, he says, to see gold the way you hear. A lie, a little too shiny. Down in the mine shafts, the air is close, like breathing through a wet scarf. You climb down carefully and find yourself crouched beside a man named Fuddle. who's been working these tunnels for 16 years. The gold listens, he tells you, tapping the wall with the back of his hand. It knows who's greedy. Here's your scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether Mali operated its gold mines through a centralized imperial system or a patchwork of local guilds and family groups. Some records suggest state control, while others hint at a more decentralized, trust-based model where miners owed tribute but retained autonomy. The answer, as usual, might be both. You climb back up, sweating through every layer of your clothes. Bakari meets you with a cup of millet beer and a laugh. Now you've earned half a pebble. Later, you watch a weighing ceremony. A trader arrives with copper rods, ivory bangles, and slabs of salt. He wants gold dust in exchange. Out comes the scale, a carved wooden arm balanced on a post, and the weights, which are not standard coins, but small bits of metal shaped like lizards, spears, or birds. You can't tell if it's currency or performance art. Both, probably. Deals are made. Dust is wrapped in tiny leather pouches. Children run through the scene with wild laughter, pretending they're princes with invisible crowns. One of them hands you a pebble and says, "For your empire." You try not to cry. The sun starts to dip, and the miners rise one by one, climbing from the ground like they're being reborn. Some carry almost nothing. One man holds a single golden fleck in his palm and smiles like it's enough. Maybe it is dot as the fires are lit and people gather to eat. Bakari tells stories of a time when the mines sang. They say the earth hummed. When Mansa Musa passed by. Of course, that could have been my stomach. You sit under the stars, which twinkle like they're winking at your day's effort. The wind carries a hint of metal, or maybe memory. You realize that gold in Mali wasn't just wealth, it was a language. It spoke in weight and shimmer, in the labor of hands and the silence of the soil. It made kingdoms, yes, but it also made stories. The next morning begins with a scent you can't quite place, part wood smoke, part something sweet and spiced. As the sun glows peach above the horizon, you rise from your woven mat, stretch the dust from your bones, and follow your nose. It leads you to something unexpectedly wonderful. Breakfast in a Malian village. And not just any village. This one is a regional hub, known for its clay ovens and culinary flair. The smells drifting through the air are from bubbling pots, sizzling, millet cakes, and slabs of fish coated in pepper and tamarind. You're about to discover that 14th century Mali didn't just glitter. It simmered, stewed, and seared with flavor. Here's your historical fact. Food in the Mali Empire was deeply regional, but surprisingly complex, blending West African staples with trade route imports. Millet, sorghum, and rice formed the base of most meals, while fish, goat, beans, and local greens brought protein and variety. Spices like ginger, cloves, and even imported salt from the Sahara were widely used by those who could afford them. You're offered a calabash bowl by a laughing grandmother named Aminata. Inside, to, a thick, smooth ball of pounded millet flour, served with a bright green sauce made of baobab leaves, dried fish, and peanut oil. You're instructed to pinch a piece with your fingers, roll it like dough, and scoop the sauce. It's warm, earthy, and surprisingly tangy. Also, mildly explosive if you inhale while chewing. Aminata eyes you. "Not bad," she says. "You didn't drop any. You beam." Somewhere nearby, someone drops an entire bowl. Laughter erupts. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some communities, breakfast included roasted locusts dipped in honey or ground into paste with herbs. A local legend even claims one warrior could hear grasshoppers a day before they arrived because he was always dreaming of snacks. Later, you visit the market where food isn't just sustenance, it's theater. Women with braided hair balance clay pots on their heads while trading gossip and garden cuttings. Boys fan small fires under smoking skewers. A line forms at the fermented milk stall, where the drink tastes like yogurt doing cartwheels. You stop. At a spice vendor, his wares are stored in gourd halves, each smelling more mysterious than the last. He offers you a sniff of something sharp and floral. For headaches, he says. Then another that smells like nutmeg and mango. For love. You buy both, obviously. Here's your scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether spices, like cloves and cinnamon and Mali, were grown locally in limited quantities or fully imported from Indian Ocean trade routes. Some suggest hybrid farming in river delta areas, while others believe they arrived solely through Tuareg caravans and North African traders. The answer might depend on how spicy your dinner was thought at midday. You find shade under a mango tree, where women are drying slices of sweet potato and plantain on reed mats. The sun acts as both chef and critic. You're offered a palm wine gourd. It tastes like fermented secrets and makes your nose twitch odd. Then comes the big meal of the day dinner, prepared communally and eaten in huge shared bowls. Tonight, it's jollof rice. Yes, the ancestor of the modern dish still passionately debated across West Africa. The 14th century version is simpler. Rice cooked with tomatoes, onions, fish stock, and a generous shake of red pepper. You eat. Beside warriors, herders, scribes, and toddlers, everyone dipping in turn, everyone teasing anyone who drops a grain. Aminata tells you that mealtimes are sacred. Not religious, she adds, but serious. You can joke about my husband, not my stew. As twilight paints the huts orange and purple, children dance with sticky fingers, and someone starts drumming on an upturned pot. The rhythm is infectious. You find yourself clapping along with a beat that's older's. Here's another fun detail. Some families had recipes so secret they were passed down orally in code songs or riddles only a daughter or apprentice would understand. To make the leaf dance, one verse might begin. Add the stone that sings. It sounds like poetry. It's actually a clue for smoked garlic. You think back to your own kitchen blinking appliances. Sterile tiles, timers yelling at you. This is a dinner you earn just by being present. The flavors linger in your mouth long after you stop chewing, like history itself refusing to be forgotten. And as the stars return, as the embers cool, and the children finally collapse into their mother's arms, you realize something. The Golden Empire of Mali wasn't just built on trade, conquest, or even scholarship. It was sustained by kitchens, by pots that fed wanderers, by spice that traveled farther than armies, by people who loved their food and the act of sharing it more than their kings. Your belly is full. Your fingers are greasy. Your heart, oddly enough, is calm. You wake to the sound of pages rustling, not the stiff, industrial flutter of a printed book, but the soft, almost papery sigh of manuscripts being aired in the sun. You sit up slowly. You're in Timbuktu again, and today, you're stepping into one of Mali's most astonishing achievements. Its libraries. Yes, libraries. as in rows upon rows of handwritten books stored in houses, mosques, and private collections. You stretch, rub the sleep from your eyes, and try to remember if you've dreamt this. Surely the Sahara isn't supposed to be full of books. And yet here they are, quietly waiting to be read. Here's your historical fact. By the 14th century, Timbuktu had become one of the major centers of Islamic learning and manuscript production in the Islamic world. It's estimated that hundreds of thousands of manuscripts on subjects from theology and astronomy to medicine and law were written or stored here. The city's scholars were renowned, and literacy was so valued that even some merchants and artisans owned personal collections. You're led by a man named Idrissa, whose family has guarded manuscripts for generations. He carries a bundle wrapped in soft goatskin. Inside, there's a book so delicate it's red with a feather. The script is dense but elegant Arabic, written in a Maghribi style. Gold flecks catch the light. This one, he says softly, explains how to measure stars using shadows. You blink. Shadow astronomy? Idrissa nods and pulls out a second. Manuscript. This one has a recipe for soap. Smells like oranges. He's not kidding. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Timbuktu manuscripts weren't just academic texts. They included love poems, shopping lists, music notation, and tips for treating headaches with crushed date pits and camel milk. One book is entirely dedicated to the behavior of jinn during sandstorms. A favorite line? Avoid making loud noises, or the spirits will gossip. Idrissa takes you to his family's private library. It's not what you imagined. No grand marble halls or leather armchairs. Just a cool mud brick room, lined with wooden shelves, the manuscripts stacked and wrapped in cloth. The scent of old parchment, desert dust, and shea butter is thick. In the air, you feel like sneezing, but that might disturb the ancestors. You're handed a catalog, a handwritten index of works. Some titles jump out. On the divine geometry of grain, letters to a distant sun about trade winds and the secret. Names of rain. You asked to read that last one. Idrissa shrugs. The middle pages were eaten by goats. Now, here's the scholarly debate. Historians still argue about the true number of manuscripts in Timbuktu during its golden age. Some believe there were as many as 700,000, while others suggest that figure includes multiple copies and fragments. The uncertainty partly stems from the fact that many of these books were privately owned and hidden often to protect them from colonial confiscation, war, or even nosy neighbors thought your next stop is the famous Sankar Mosque. Once a university, this is where scholars debated ethics, algebra, and metaphysics under starry skies. You imagine them arguing late into the night, their oil lamps flickering, students nodding off in the corner. A professor might say something like, "To understand justice, you must first understand onions," and then spend 3 hours explaining why. You'd take that class. Outside, you meet a young scribe named Owo, who's copying a manuscript using a bamboo pen and ink made from crushed charcoal and acacia gum. Her script is so perfect you suspect magic. She shows you a text she's been illuminating with gold leaf. "This is for a wedding," she says. "We hide love advice in the margins." You spot a line that reads, "When your husband forgets his sandals, let him." Good advice. Honestly thought as the sun begins to lower and the shadows stretch like yawns. You help Awa and Idrissa gently place the aired manuscripts back into their storage wrappings. Books don't like being alone at night. Idrissa says with a wink. You're not sure he's joking. Before you leave, you ask why so many people here guard their books with such devotion. Awa answers without looking up. Because someday, someone will need what's inside. That stays with you later, as you sit on the rooftop, watching dust devils swirl through alleyways. You realize that Mali's strength wasn't just its gold or armies. It was this, an empire that believed in paper, in ink, in the idea that a fat mind stretched by knowledge could hold up a city. You rest your head against the warm clay and whisper a thank you to whoever decided to write down the shape of the stars or the recipe for soap. You're living proof that some words really do outlast empires. You've gotten used to the rhythm now, the dusty breeze, the friendly greetings, the morning songs sung to millet as if it might forget to grow otherwise. But today, you sense a different energy in the air, a kind of quiet focus, like a village, holding its breath. Something important is happening, and it is. Today, you witness justice in 14th century Mali. Don't panic. You haven't been caught stealing dates or mispronouncing someone's uncle's name. You're just an observer permitted, for once, to peek inside the intricate and sometimes surprising world of how this empire resolved disputes, kept the peace, and sometimes made things very weird. Here's your historical fact. Mali had a well-developed legal system that blended Islamic law, Sharia, with local customs, fiqh, and maslaha. Cases were handled by qadis, Islamic judges, village elders, or appointed mediators, depending on the nature of the dispute. The goal? Restoration, not punishment. Mali didn't build prisons. It built compromises. Your first glimpse comes in the town square, where a crowd is gathering beneath a shade structure of braided reeds. Two men are facing each other, arms folded. One is shouting about a stolen goat. The other insists the goat wandered off, seeking enlightenment. You suspect the goat is smarter than both of them. A Qadi sits at the center, an older man with impossibly white robes and a fan made of peacock feathers. He doesn't rush. Instead, he listens, like really listens. Eyebrows raise. Witnesses are called. A boy dramatically reenacts the goat's escape. Someone offers a drawing. It looks like a fat dog. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some towns, disputes were resolved by symbolic acts instead of penalties. One man accused of breaking a neighbor's roof was made to build him a shade hut while wearing the broken roof on his head for a week. The goat case ends with a shared meal, a written promise, and the accused giving up one of his chickens as collateral. For future goat-related incidents, the judge mumbles. The men nod. The crowd claps. And just like that, peace is restored over poultry. Next, you visit a woman named Khadija, who serves as both a local mediator and herbalist. Her hut smells of ginger and mint, and her shelves are filled with jars, parchments, and tiny carved figurines. She explains that while Qadis handled official trials, local women often mediated domestic conflicts, marital spats, inheritance tangles, even noisy neighbors. You sip hibiscus tea while she helps a couple settle a land boundary dispute, using pebbles and singing bowls. It's oddly effective. Now here's the scholarly debate. Historians still argue over the precise legal authority of women in the Mali Empire. Some accounts emphasize their power in informal community resolution and property decisions, while others suggest their influence was limited by Islamic structures. The truth, as always, probably lies somewhere between scripture and soup recipes. As the day wears on, you attend a more formal proceeding in a larger town near the Niger River. This one involves trade. Two merchants arguing over weights, dates, and whether a bale of indigo was secretly watered down. The court uses calibrated stones, testimonies from two scribes, and, rather surprisingly, a music performance meant to demonstrate one merchant's honor and rhythm. Apparently, being offbeat is a red flag. Here, you notice something subtle but powerful. Reputation matters more than paperwork. Mali's system is built on trust, memory, and communal accountability. Your name is your currency. Gossip is your audit. You suddenly feel very exposed. Here's another fun cultural rule. In some places, if you were found to be lying in court, you'd be made to sing your confession to a rhythm drum. People remembered it better that way. Some still hum old lyrics like lullabies. At sunset, you follow Khadija back to her village. She tells you the laws were never meant to break people. They're meant to stitch them back together, gently, like mending a cloak. And as the fire is lit and the sound of drums returns, and children chase shadows across the walls of clay homes, you realize something important. This empire didn't just build cities and store knowledge and eat delicious peanut stew. It also knew how to keep peace without breaking spirits. You look up at the stars, steady and serene. Somewhere out there, the goat is still wandering, possibly seeking a lyre. This morning, you wake up to bells. Not church bells, mind you, small bronze ones tied to the ankles of a caravan of camels. They jingle softly as the beasts trudge by, trailing long shadows across the sand. You're in Jen now, Mali's sister, city to Timbuktu, and the hub of something glittering, dusty, and essential. Trade. You throw on a tunic one that smells suspiciously like dried fish and follow the caravan toward the river docks. It's market day, and you're about to see why Mali's economy didn't just run on gold. It sang with salt, hummed with hides, and glowed faintly with kola nuts and copper. Here's your historical fact. By the 14th century, Mali was the nerve center of trans-Saharan trade. Goods flowed from North Africa, the Middle East, and even parts of Europe, arriving by camel, canoe, and calloused foot. Mali exported gold, ivory, and enslaved people, and imported books, textiles, horses, and ceramics. Jen, perched at the edge of the Niger River, was where river trade met desert commerce, and it buzzed. You try not to look overwhelmed as you enter the main market square. It's enormous. Picture dozens of long cloth-covered stalls, pyramid-shaped. Mounds of spices, slabs of pink salt stacked like chessboards, and vendors yelling prices over the bray of donkeys and the bubbling of stew pots. The smells alone are dizzying: ginger, goat, mango, mud, and something suspiciously sweet. You pause at a stand selling hand-dyed indigo cloth. The vendor, an older woman with gold in her teeth and laughter in her voice, presses a bolt of fabric into your arms. This one changes color if you gossip while wearing it. You buy it immediately. Now, here's your quirky tidbit. One caravan leader tells you that his camels are trained to recognize the scent of each city they travel to. Timbuktu smells like ink, he says. Jen smells like tamarind and ambition. You make a note to never underestimate a camel. The real stars of the market are the traders. You meet a Hausa merchant with a feathered turban who sells mirrors from Cairo. A Sanique woman deals in medicinal resins and rubs a pinch of frankincense. On your wrist for emotional clarity, a man metalworker is offering tiny copper. Frogs, for fertility or just to confuse guests. Your arms are quickly full of questionable purchases. Here's the scholarly debate. Historians still puzzle over the exact structure of Mali's trade taxation system. Some sources suggest tariffs were paid at city gates. Others say taxes were levied directly on caravans per item or weight. There are also accounts of trade guilds controlling prices, and even rumors of river tolls paid in kola nuts. The reality? Likely a patchwork of all of the above, flexibly enforced depending on how well you haggled, or how intimidating your camels looked. You find yourself drawn to the salt section. Enormous slabs from the mines of Tegeza glisten like frozen milk. In a land where refrigeration doesn't exist, salt is everything preserver, currency, and flavor maker. One trader lets you taste a flake. That's a 2-month camel ride. He says, you chew respectfully. Later, you're invited to a trading house, a compound where merchants from different regions store goods, sip tea, and occasionally argue about the price of leopard hides. You sit cross-legged with them, listening as deals are made with more hand gestures than words. There's a ritual to it, almost musical. An opening joke, a mock insult, a dramatic sigh, then finally a nod and a handshake. Here's another odd but delightful fact. In some regions, traders would seal a deal by touching the same coin and then throwing it in a pot of boiling water. If it sizzled, the ancestors approved. If not, they just tried again with more enthusiasm. Night falls and the market quiets. But the docks are still busy. Long canoes stacked with grain, pottery, even live chickens are being pulled upstream. You climb aboard one and feel the current tug at your thoughts. Somewhere downriver, this same water will carry copper bowls to a distant village, or dates to a family preparing for a wedding. You lean back, the scent of roasted peanuts drifting over from a nearby cook fire. Mali's cities were built from mud and gold, yes, but they were held together by rhythm. Not just musical rhythm, but economic rhythm. The rise and fall of supply, the ebb and flow of salt and silk, the steady thump of barter beneath the stars. And you're just lucky, enough to be floating through it. You wake to the sound of chanting, not the booming call of a muezzin this time, though that does float in later, but a softer rhythm, like the murmur of wind through reeds. As you step into the morning light, you realize you've arrived at one of the most quietly extraordinary elements of Mali's golden age. Its school's dot, welcome to Timbuktu's intellectual underworld. Here's your historical fact. By the 14th century, Timbuktu was one of the most important centers of learning in the Islamic world. Its universities, most famously Sankara, attracted scholars from North Africa, the Middle East, and beyond. These institutions didn't resemble modern universities so much as scholarly households, where students lived, memorized, debated, and copied texts by hand. And yes, those texts were everywhere. You duck into the courtyard of a madrasa, where boys sit cross-legged with wooden boards coated in wet ink. They chant verses softly, rocking back and forth, guided by a teacher who looks like he's memorized entire galaxies. They're not just studying religion, either. Astronomy, botany, philosophy, grammar, law if someone wrote it down in Arabic. Someone here copied and preserved it. Your feet crunch on sand, but your ears ring with centuries of questions. A student sees your curious face and hands you a scrap of parchment. It's a diagram of planetary orbits, complete with marginalia. In the corner, someone's doodled a very bored-looking camel. And here's your quirky tidbit. Many Timbuktu manuscripts were protected from termites by being stored in leather satchels and buried in dry clay pots beneath floorboards. Some were even rubbed with crushed herbs as a natural preservative. These techniques work. Tens of thousands of manuscripts survive to this day, some still smelling faintly of mint and sand, alwood. You spend the afternoon with a scholar named Ahmad, who lets you sit in on a debate between his students. The question on today's docket: is the movement of the stars proof of divine will or just complex math? You're not allowed to speak, but you managed to sneak a cookie from the refreshments tray. It tastes like sesame and enlightenment. Here's the scholarly debate. Historians still argue about how open Timbuktu schools were to outsiders and women. While some evidence points to robust exchanges between visiting scholars and local students, other texts suggest strict hierarchies and gender limitations. What's certain is that education here was deeply prized, so much so that families would send their children hundreds of miles just to study with a renowned teacher. You follow Ahmad to the Sankar Mosque as evening sets in. It's towering mud. Minaret looks like something halfway between a spaceship and a termite mound, and its shadows stretch across the square like point fingers. Inside, rows of students murmur over candlelit texts, while Ahmad retrieves a box the size of a cat. Inside it, dusty paper miracles, pages on agricultural rotation, early optics, even recipes for rosewater syrup. There's a note in the margin of 1. Do not lend this to Idris. He does not return things. You nod solemnly. Everyone knows an Idris. Later, you help a scribe sharpen his reed pens. The ink is made from crushed acacia pods and iron salts, and stains your fingers until they look like you've shaken hands with a squid. He writes right to left with astonishing speed, copying a 9th-century poem about rain falling on the Sahel. You whisper the final lines to yourself, letting them coat your thoughts like honey. O land of sun and silence, you keep our dreams in clay jars. By nightfall, the library's clay walls glow from within, lit by oil lamps that flicker like stars. You sit on the rooftop with Ahmad and his students, and they point out constellations in the sky, ones you've never seen before, named after ancestors, animals, and concepts. The one that looks like a river snake? Ahmad asks. That's the path to the next thought. You realize this isn't just about preserving knowledge. It's about growing it, feeding it, passing it from one tongue to another, like a date split and shared. Before you go, Ahmad hands you a small scroll, tied with blue string. It's a list of questions, he says. Ask one every morning. Let your life be a library. And as you curl up beneath a canopy of Saharan stars, soothed by the smell of old ink and open windows, you find yourself dreaming of books that breathe and schools with mud walls, and knowledge that never needed a vault to stay safe. Just voices willing to carry it forward. You blink awake to the sound of hammering slow, rhythmic, almost meditative. It's not drums this time, or camel hooves, or chanting scholars. It's the sound of a man making a wall. Today, you've stumbled into the everyday magic of maintenance. In other words, how the people of Mali kept their cities built from sun-baked mud standing tall, season after season. Here's your historical fact. Cities like Timbuktu and Jem were constructed almost entirely from banco, a mix of sun-dried mud, straw, and sometimes crushed baobab bark. Every year, before the rainy season, entire communities gathered to repair and reinforce the structures in a ritual known as the Plastering Festival. It was architecture by annual reunion. You approach a wall being re-sculpted with wet earth. A young boy hands you a lump of banco with a wink. "Try not to mess up," he says. "This wall's older than my grandfather's jokes." You slap it onto the wall. It sticks. For now, the air smells like damp earth and hot tea. Women walk by with baskets of fresh clay balanced on their heads. Men whistle as they pass up bundles of straw. Children form small battalions to throw mud at one another when the elders aren't looking. You can't tell if this is construction or a very well-coordinated party. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some families in Jen claimed their houses sang after being replastered due to the way fresh mud muffled street noise and echoed footsteps. Others decorated their walls with symbols drawn in ash or goat's milk, early street art with a protective twist. One wall you pass is painted with a stylized fish. "That's for fertility," someone whispers. Or possibly just because the artist liked fish. You take a break with the mud crew and drink cold hibiscus tea. The elders tell you that the great mosque of Jinn, an immense, magnificent structure made entirely of banco, is recoated every single year in a massive communal effort. It's like repainting the Sistine Chapel, but barefoot and with more laughter. Here's the scholarly debate. Experts still debate how much of Mali's architectural tradition was influenced by older indigenous techniques versus imported Islamic styles. The use of wooden beams sticking out of the walls, both for structural support and as scaffolding. Footholds might be local genius, imported Berber design, or some combination of both. Like the rest of Mali, it's a beautiful blend. As the sun climbs higher, the walls dry into a uniform shade of golden brown. You realize that these cities weren't built once and forgotten. They were sculpted again and again, like pottery passed between hands. Someone hands you a calabash of sour milk, and you sip it slowly while sitting under the shade of a wall you just helped repair. "He'll outlive you now," the boy from earlier says. You nod, not entirely sure if he's teasing. You wander into a quieter part of the city, where homes hug each other like old friends. Doors are low, meant to be ducked under as a show of humility, and some are carved with spirals, fish, or palm trees. One woman is decorating her entryway with white ash patterns to invite good dreams. And here's a real oddity. Some families buried coins or small amulets in the walls of their homes when rebuilding to bless the structure. You watch one man press a tiny bronze lion into a fresh patch of banco, then smooth it over like icing a cake. "For courage," he murmurs. You ask if the lion ever comes back out. He grins. "Only if the house gets bored." By evening, the city gleams in golden light. It doesn't shimmer like marble or glisten like glass. It glows the way something living does, a warmth that comes from within. And here's the best part. There's no ego in this city building. No plaques, no signature bricks, no towering monuments etched with names. Everyone works, everyone rests, and then they do it all again next year. The city is the celebrity, and its people are its pulse. You fall asleep on a rooftop, surrounded by walls you helped reshape. Somewhere, a child still flings a mud ball into the night. Somewhere else, someone is tracing their fingers over a newly etched fish. And just before you drift off, the walls around you seem to hum, not loudly, but enough for you to feel it. Maybe they really do sing after all. The wind is soft this morning, curling through alleyways like a whisper you almost catch. Somewhere behind you, a rooster is deeply confused about the time. But none of that matters right now, because today you walk into the beating heart of something far older than the buildings, older than the libraries, even older than the gold. You walk into a market. Here's your historical fact. Timbuktu and its sister cities weren't just intellectual hubs. They were massive commercial centers. By the mid-14th century, Timbuktu's market connected goods and people from across the Sahara to the Niger River and beyond. Salt from the desert, gold from the south, textiles from North Africa, ivory, ostrich feathers, kola nuts, and yes books all pass through this economic nerve center dot, but don't imagine a tidy grid of stalls and labeled shelves. This is chaos with rhythm. You duck under a reed awning to find bolts of indigo-dyed fabric fluttering like flags. A merchant grabs your wrist, not unkindly, and thrusts a handful of dried mango into your palm. "Free sample," he says. "The next one's a fortune." You chew. It tastes like sweet sun and honest ambition. Around the corner, you nearly trip over a camel sitting in the shade, chewing something suspiciously crunchy. Its handler shrugs. "Old maps," he says. "He's got expensive taste." You pass salt blocks stacked like little white pyramids, glinting in the light. Some of these traveled hundreds of miles from the mines of Tagaza, packed 2 per camel, through windstorms and robber territory. A single block of salt here might fetch the price of a good-sized sheep or an awkward marriage proposal. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some traders in medieval Mali used elaborate hand signals to negotiate across language barriers. Others recited rhyming chants or short poems to establish prices and protect their reputations. You overhear one man say, "If my wool is flawed, may my goats grow wings and fly away." You're not sure if that's a guarantee or a threat. Your feet carry you toward the riverbank, where the loading docks resemble a puzzle in progress. Canoes dugouts carved from enormous trees arrive with goods wrapped in banana leaves and tied with palm fronds. A woman selling kola nuts waves at you and insists you try one. You immediately regret it. It's bitter, spicy, and possibly sentient. You watch a teenage boy bargain for a scroll with a monk-like scholar. He offers 3 dried fish, 2 gourds of honey, and his best sheep. The scholar nods slowly, then throws in a second scroll. "For your courage," he says. Here's the scholarly debate. Historians still disagree on the actual economic scale of Timbuktu during its peak. Some claim it was modest, but deeply influential, due to its intellectual prestige. Others argue that Mali's markets rivaled Europe's wealthiest cities in terms of volume and reach. What's clear is that the gold trade, often passed up the Niger via riverboats, was robust enough to make Mali's emperor is the stuff of legend. You overhear a trader boast that a single nugget of Mali gold once paid for a week's worth of wine in Fez. His friend rolls his eyes and mutters, "In Fez, everything pays for wine." You stop to pet a donkey wearing a necklace of cowrie shells. A little girl offers you a puffed rice cake. She says it tastes like clouds. She's right, Dot, and for all its bustle, the market has a rhythm that feels almost restful, like a drumbeat you can nap to. There's haggling, but never shouting. Laughter floats across the spice stalls. Even the camels seem to sigh rather than groan. You realize that here, the exchange of goods isn't just commerce. It's a kind of choreography. A social dance with the pulse of a city stitched into every gesture. A final breeze carries the scent of dried dates, warm metal, and something faintly floral acacia, maybe. You breathe it in. You let it settle. A woman selling ink sticks catches your eye. "Buy one," she says, even if you don't write. You ask her why. She just smiles, because you might. And that's the thing, isn't it? This place, the mud, the gold, the stars, the scrolls, it's built on the possibility that something valuable might happen. That knowledge might be passed on. That walls might be repaired. That one day, a stranger like you might walk through a market and fall in love with the way a city breathes. And maybe, just maybe, carry that breath back out into the world. Leave the market full, not just of mango slices and sheep cheese and suspicious kola nuts, but of something much deeper. A calm, golden hum, like the sound of a library smiling. The sky fades to a soft indigo now, painted with stars you don't recognize, but somehow trust. Somewhere in the distance, a drum taps once. Then again, slower, sleepier. You lie on a woven mat under the open sky. The walls around you still warm from the sun. The mud smells like memory, like earth that remembers every hand that shaped it. Tonight, the city sleeps, but not in silence. A baby fusses softly in the courtyard below. Someone laughs, distant and muffled. A door creaks open, then shuts with a sigh. Even sleeping, Timbuktu breathes. Its breath moves through you too slow, even, safe. You close your eyes and picture it all again. The markets, the libraries, the singing walls, the gold that glittered without ever needing to shout. You picture the questions written on scrolls, buried in books, etched into clay, still waiting for someone to ask them. And maybe that someone is you. The mat beneath you is firm. The stars above are kind. The fan you left on hums like a sandstorm in reverse soft, steady, pulling you downward. Let your shoulders melt. Let your thoughts stretch out like the river. Let your breath echo the city's breath old, warm, and unhurried. You are not walking now. You are floating. You are not remembering now. You are dreaming.